Welcome once again to our encouraging word. Today, our word comes from 1 Kings. It's the story of David and Goliath. I came to a place where there are physical struggles, a football field, to give this message. Now, to remind us of the story, David was a young man who spent most of his time as a shepherd at this point in his life, and the armies of Israel were arrayed against the armies of the Philistine armies. And David had been sent by his father to bring food to his older brothers who were in the Israelite army. And when David got to the front lines, he saw a huge Philistine, 7 feet tall, an immense man, powerful man, experienced warrior, stand out on the field and challenge the Israelite army to a one-on-one battle. And whoever won would be the victor, and the other army would have to serve. It was a deliberate taunting against the Lord God, and David saw it that way, and he was amazed that no one would trust in God and answer the challenge. So he said, well, I'll do it. And they brought him to King Saul, and Saul said, you're just a young guy. But David said, I've got a mighty God on my side. And so Saul said, okay. And he gave David his armor, which is kind of a comical part of the story because the armor was just too heavy for David to wear. So David arrayed himself in his shepherd's outfit. He had a stick, and more importantly, he had a slingshot. And, I was thinking about that. If I were a shepherd, a young shepherd boy, and I was just standing out in the fields watching sheep all day, what would I do? I would pick up stones and I would get really good with my slingshot. Hour after hour, I would practice with my slingshot. So David brought his slingshot and some perfectly smooth stones to the battlefield and faced off with Goliath. And here's what he said. And these are the important words that we need to remember. I'm sorry, I said 1 Kings. This is 1 Samuel. 1 Samuel 17, verse 45 through 47. Then David said to the Philistine, "You come to me with a sword and a spear and a javelin, but I come to you in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have taunted. This day the Lord will deliver you up into my hands, and I will strike you down and remove your head from you. And I will give the dead bodies of the army of the Philistines this day to the birds of the sky and the wild beasts of the earth, that all the earth may know that there is a God in Israel, and that all this assembly may know that the Lord does not deliver by sword or spear." The Lord does not deliver by sword or spear. "For the battle is the Lord's, and he will give you into our hands." The battle is the Lord's. Well, sure enough, David did go out and use that slingshot to kill Goliath, and the armies of Israel were victorious. So what is the message for us? Well, the key phrase there is the battle is the Lord's. When we face the Goliaths in our life, those invincible oppositions, whatever they are, the things that just seem impossible, overwhelming, too much for us, we need to remember that they may be too much for us, but they're not too much for God. The battle is the Lord's. And we need to do what David did so well. Number one, he trusted in God. He listened to God. And when God told him to go against Goliath, he used the gifts that God had given him, his experience as a shepherd, his ability with a slingshot. And so when we face these Goliaths in our life, what do we need to do? We need to trust in God. listen to God for his direction, and when he tells us what to do, we need to use the gifts and experience God has given us to go into battle for the Lord. This is the encouraging word of the Lord. Thanks be to God.